Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining us today. Scott will be joining us momentarily. We'll wait a couple more minutes before we... Hi everyone. I know what's happening. Scott.
Hi, how are you?
Thanks for coming. Great.
My pleasure.
Great seeing you.
Absolute pleasure. And you, looking forward to this one again. So yeah, brilliant.
Me too. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I have with me restaurant consultant Scott Turner and Parth Patel. So for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Ufuk Soytürk. I'm the CEO and founder of Across Restaurant Consulting. What we do is accounting and finance and purchasing for restaurants. We scale restaurants up, we prepare them for growth and enhance their profitability, excuse me. And Scott, could you please do a little bit of introduction for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Scott Turner. I'm the founder of Auden Hospitality, based out of London in the UK. So really nice to be on this show with you, Ufuk. I know we've had lots of great conversation up to this. So Auden Hospitality, we are an advisory business that is primarily focused on helping hoteliers and operators think differently about growing their business. So, I worked 15 years in hotels, always in F&B, became quite frustrated with how F&B never seemed to push the boundaries. It was kind of the same in each four walls. So I left and worked in independent restaurants. After 7 years, I left independent restaurants to set up my own advisory business and found myself back in hotels, working with hoteliers to do everything that restaurateurs do really well, that don't transfer into a hotel environment naturally. And we bring that different mindset into that. So we help hoteliers grow their F&B. Quite often, rooms are the ones that are the golden eggs of the operation, and F&B is the black swan. So I'm here to change that. We also work with founders and operators who are in startup mode, and we help bring some of that corporate experience to them so that they keep the creativity, they really master the brand, and we help bring the foundations that go underneath to help them set up a business successfully and grow. And then as they start growing, we help them scale from there as well. And I know we're going to talk a lot about that when it comes to franchising and group purchasing shortly. Alongside that, we have Auden Resource Hub, and that is really a website that's aimed at mid-level management. And the thought process behind it was, over the years when I was going up through the ranks, there was never kind of a resource that you could go to and get templates, you could get courses, you could get thought leaders giving opinions on how to do things. So I created Auden Resource Hub. On there, there's some templates that people can pick from. There's an online course about writing the perfect business plan. And then conversations like this that I have with people every single day and every single week go on there as videos so that people can have access to people like you, Ufuk, who've got an amazing experience and can learn some bits about how they can grow their business. And then finally, just recently, we set up a procurement business here in the UK, Auden Procurement, and that's really focusing on helping people master a lot of what we're going to talk about today from a procurement perspective. And year to date, we're on £500,000 worth of saving for our clients. So yeah, lots to talk about today, which is really exciting.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing, Scott. Scott, you have a more operational focus. I have more of a back office focus. One of the things that I love chatting with you is how we are aligned. Like we have different backgrounds, but we converge at the same point. And in every conversation, I learn something new from you. Like this skilling was something new that I learned from you. I think these podcasts are extremely nice because we approach to the same problem from two different angles and merging at the same spot. So people can hear both of our perspectives, approaching to the problem from two different angles. We both know, I know some operational stuff, accounting, finance, all the back office and procurement, all that kind of stuff. I think that convergence of both of us provides a more than full picture for anyone who is listening to us.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, in some of the best operations that I've worked in, the finance and the operations team have been close knit. And I think, quite often you see finance guys who are seen as the holy grail, and they're the guys who come at the monthly review or turn down purchase orders and that type of thing. But actually, the resource that these guys have, that you have, can help operators manage the business more effectively. And I think when you can work in collaboration to fix some of those challenges that you're facing without operators fearing those conversations, it leads to a much greater result in the end. So hopefully, if people see this who are in that situation now, it's about how the finance director and the operations director can start being big buddies and really trying to find those problems together, because both hold some great knowledge in terms of being able to do that. So yeah, and I think once you get on an understanding of how each other thinks, what the pain points are for each other, you can start having much easier conversations, because you know what each other needs to get out of a certain situation. And let's face it, no operator doesn't want the business to be successful. No finance guy doesn't want the business to be successful. Yep. So you're both saying the same things. You're just going about it in a different way. If you can align those resources, it can be much quicker and much more powerful. So yeah, a perfect example of why we kind of talk quite well together is because we both kind of chat about how we get to the same result a different way, and we kind of find the mean point in between.
That's good. I want to commend you for the creation of that knowledge base. What I felt when I was running a hospitality company was, and I was lucky enough that there were a lot of good people that I could tap into, because we were a large organization. But many operators, the whole company is on their shoulders. And just like any business, restaurant is a full business, meaning there is a manufacturing side, purchasing, accounting and finance, operations itself, right? There's an HR side of this. There is basically like 10 different components and 500 different things that a company needs to do in order to function successfully. And nobody is great at all of these things, right? Nobody can be good at all of these things. And in a small company, people don't have a lot of resources, a lot of different talent base that they can tap into. So a resource knowledge base like the one that you created basically brings people that information, at least like knowing what questions to ask, right? And I think that that opens them up to a whole different ideas and understanding what they are doing and maybe what they are not doing. Ask the right questions and then get that side of the business done. What I see, most people focus on the operational side only, and not focus on maybe some of the other things, unless it's basically becomes a pain point. But I think a business is like, those like pentagon shaped, like skill curves. A business can't really rely on like one aspect only, or the operations or something like that. It needs to be good at all different sides of the business. And I commend you for taking the time and putting your knowledge and experience in creating such a knowledge base.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those, isn't it, where the greatest leaders don't have specific knowledge of who they're leading, but they can ask the right questions, and they can sometimes the naivety around the subject can be the superpower. And having experts in each individual field that you empower, that you trust, that go off and lead people the same way, are the ones where you see the most high performing teams. And I think that's the most powerful. And fundamentally, people want to learn. I mean, I digest so much information on a daily basis through podcasts and LinkedIn and that type of thing. And it's about how you keep evolving yourself as well. And that resource has got to be out there for people. But I've worked in corporate environments, and I've worked in environments where we're in startup mode and there's no systems and procedures. And sometimes that isn't for everyone. I know people who were working in Four Seasons hotels and tried to leave, and because it's so systematic there, they couldn't handle environments where it
Yeah.
there wasn't a manual for everything. So sometimes people can operate effectively in those environments. Sometimes people thrive on them. I thrived on the fact that there was no structure and it was all there for me to put in, because that's what I found exciting. But you have to have a knowledge of how to do it, and ultimately you have to be great at leading people, because that's the way to do it. And I've talked before about how when I was ops director level, kind of COO level, I didn't try and get too involved in learning the ins and outs of the individual systems we were using, because I felt that naivety meant that I asked more questions that got to better results. Because if I'd have known how the inventory system works, for example, if I'd have known the ins and outs and how to get all the information, I might have preempted what that information was going to tell me. I might have done it myself and not developed my team. So I tried to stay as kind of objective as possible, not get into the ins and outs of the system, and ask questions and probe with my teams. One, it helped us get to the information because we had to go find it, and two, the people who had to go find it started developing that skill of understanding why we needed to know those things as well. So I think, having resources there available, making knowledge accessible for people, especially in the industry at the minute where it is tough to train people because of senior leaders being overwhelmed, turnover, all the issues that we hear about every day. So to have resource there, whether it's Auden Resource Hub or whether it's other outlets or whether you just listen to podcasts every day where you can get them from, it's what is going to make you a great leader long term as well. So it's always about keeping learning, isn't it? I spent some time with Sean Walchef, Troy Hooper a few weeks ago, and we're talking about kind of content and going video and this type of thing, and that's what I'm really engrossing myself in now, is learning all about that side. So it's about looking at where you need to improve, looking at where you have to build your skills, and then just engrossing yourself into being able to learn as much as you can to come out of the other side with some knowledge to be able to do it effectively. So never stop learning is kind of my advice on that one.
100%. And folks, I think if one thing I would like to leave with you today is reach out to me or Scott with your questions. If we don't know, we probably know somebody who can help you. And the most important thing is that, number one, ask the question. Don't be afraid to ask the question. And number two, do the reach out. And I think you will see that there are a lot of good people in the industry, like Scott, who would, the reason why Scott and I are in this business is basically to help the operators, to advance this. People helped me when I needed help, and now I'm in a position to help others. So that's why we are doing this. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us with your questions. Scott, is there anything you would like to add before we kick off?
No, I think you've covered everything there, isn't it? It's if you know you need to develop skills and you want to improve, or you need to make a difference in your business, whatever that might be. One of the things I've found since I've been on the journey with Auden is reaching out to people who are ahead of you on the journey, who you look up to, who are best in class at what they do, because it's amazing how many of these people are available. And we met because we started liking each other's content, and then we suddenly said, let's have a chat. And we've been speaking probably just under a year now, and it's amazing how many people I've done that with, that we're connected with on LinkedIn ourselves as well. I've spent a lot of time with Jim Taylor in Canada. He's helped me tremendously on how I look after LinkedIn and how I do LinkedIn. Sean Walchef just recently, Troy Hooper, I was speaking with Steve Turk a month ago. All these people I can reel off who make themselves available for nothing other than meeting, networking. We might be able to help each other, but I can honestly tell you that I've come out of every single conversation with something to take away. So yeah, reach out to people. It's amazing how accessible people are when you get in touch with them to have a chat. And I try and take that myself and make myself as available as possible to do the same thing with people, just because I've had so many people doing the same for me. So yeah, don't underestimate the power of connection and asking people to just jump on a quick call. That would be my take on that before we kind of get into the subject.
Absolutely. So today, before I start with today, Scott and I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago that was for how to scale up, how to use systems to do that. So this is a follow-up and closing the loop on the scaling up and profitability side of things. We are going to post the full podcast next week, and this will be available, I think after this podcast, this will be available. So today we'll be talking about mastering supply chains, leveraging group purchasing organizations in the bar and restaurant industry. Scott, would you like to start with the supply chain and as the franchise grows? And when we say franchise, we mean whether for a franchise organization or an independent organization that has 3 locations going for 5 or 7. That's what we mean. Basically, scaling up. What do you need to do as your organization grows? How to manage your supply chain in that? Scott, would you like to take a shot at it?
I'll do my best. Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, this is about anyone who's kind of growing and scaling and looking at whether they license their brand or franchise their brand out to people. And I think one of the key aspects of when you do grow, whichever way you grow, is keeping the control on the quality that you might have when you had 1 or 2 locations, because it's very easy to do that from that perspective, because you can micromanage 1, 2 locations. As you start growing bigger, it's about finding that efficiency, and not only finding the efficiency, but being able to, back to my point before, how do you simplify it so that you can roll the concept out across multiple locations, keep the same quality, keep the same consistency, and make sure that you're representing the brand in every single branch that you have. So we all know the great people out there who do this extremely well. And very recently I had a conversation with someone, and we were talking about a taqueria that I'm working with here in London. And we were talking about how the line works and how we can get a bit more efficient, because we've got more demand than we can kind of serve in any one night, and how do we turn tables quicker? And he was just like, well, have you gone and looked at how Taco Bell put together their line? Because fundamentally their business is you bring people in, you get as many people through as you can, and the guest leaves, and it's about delivering quality across all their locations. And it's about kind of looking at that going, okay, Taco Bell isn't the level that we're going for in this taqueria, but the process of how they put it together, regardless of quality, is what we need to be learning from. So I would encourage anyone, as they're starting to look at supply chain and growing, to look at those people who are already there. Back to that point of who's already further ahead on the journey. Have a look at those people and look and see and look at how they do it. But one of the big things that I always have conversations with potential franchisors, licensors, is how you can do that and keep a control of your supply chain. And I've worked with startup brands that have had 1 or 2 locations in their own country, and then gone to another country. They've gone to another location, and they've not been properly set up for the supply chain, and it's meant that we had to either go and find local alternatives which weren't the same. They were close, but there was obviously local nuances, or we were having to import items from the US, Beirut, XYZ. And that obviously adds to the overall cost of running the business. So I think it's super important that when people are looking at when it's the right time to grow and to scale, that they start looking at how they can start having a control over the supply chain so that they can maintain quality no matter where it is in the country, no matter where it is in the region, no matter where it is in the world. So this is very much about looking at that and looking at it without emotion. And I know that's hard for founder-led businesses to do that, but looking at it objectively as a business and looking at where you may have to alter certain bits to make it quicker, simpler, more efficient, more accessible from a product perspective, but also looking at how you can make sure that that is readily available and you control it. There's lots of other benefits for that. One, group pricing. We're about to talk about it, but the more you buy, the more you put through suppliers as a business, the better price you get overall. So if you're 5 locations, you want to franchise, if you can benefit from the franchisees that you're bringing in, that obviously has a benefit for everyone. So again, how do you control that? How do you set that up systematically to do it? Especially in the US and Canada, where you have people like Cisco and people like that, who you can consolidate because it's got supply across the countries. It makes it much easier. So at the start, how do you start working with some of these guys? And I know it's the same in the US as it is here. Sometimes people look at the Ciscos of the world and people like that and kind of go, I'm better going down to the local guy down the road and all the rest of it. That's true when you have 1 location, 2 locations. As you start growing locations to 5 to 10, you start going cross-state, you start going international, you start kind of going across borders. That becomes much more difficult to have the local guy down the road. And it's about how you can work with some of these big distributors to still deliver that quality, but be able to do it. And if you have control of supply chain, you can start putting that purchasing power in. You can start asking for bespoke lines and that side of things as well. Then as you start looking at individual recipes, patty mixes, sauces, this type of thing, the more you can control that, you can create an ecosystem that then means that, one, you're putting it in franchise agreements that they have to buy from your nominated suppliers. You're producing the products, which means your ecosystem is you're not only franchising the restaurant brand to them, but you're also now sending the IP for the sauces and the products out to them as well. So you're also making percentage of sales on that supply chain that comes through. So from a business perspective, controlling the supply chain has consistency perspective, it has a quality perspective, but there's also a commercial perspective that by you doing that, it means that you can keep everything within the ecosystem of the brand that helps you deliver stronger results moving forwards for everyone. So yeah, there's a lot to go on this one. I've tried to summarize it as best I can, but yeah, it's a big old topic, this one. I think the other thing then is, for me on supply chain at the minute, and we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago, Ufuk as well, is, I'm seeing a lot of people right now falling into the trap of live pricing. And I'm seeing a lot of people being fooled by sales talk from tech providers, purchasing providers who start talking about live pricing. And it's probably worth touching on that for a minute because it's a thought provoker for people. So when you go into live pricing, fundamentally, you're not building a relationship with a supplier, because what you're telling that supplier is, I'm going to benchmark you every single day against 2 or 3 of your competitors, and whoever's the cheapest on that product for the day, I'm going to buy it from. So you're not striking a partnership with a supplier. You're not having a loyalty with a supplier. You're not developing a partnership with a supplier. What you're basically telling them is the cheapest guy's going to win. So when you then need last minute orders, when you need last minute deliveries, when you need products, when they're going out of stock on products and they're starting to hold and reserve products, you can't start shouting down the phone at the guy because he isn't prepared to do it, because you're not giving him the loyalty the other way. So I have a real issue with live pricing, because I don't think it's working for both parties, and that's how supplier relationship should work. I think the other thing then is if you pick two suppliers, and those two suppliers know you're on live pricing because your baskets are fluctuating, and it's a small world out there as well. It doesn't take a genius to work out that they're not going to give you the best prices in the market, because they know that overall you're going to go with whoever's the cheapest, and the loyalty isn't there. And when push comes to the shove, they're probably better focused on those guys who'll give them the full basket. So if you're on an inventory system or purchasing system that does this, and you have John's fruit and veg and Dave's fruit and veg, and you're comparing live pricing against those two, if John's fruit and veg is cheaper than Dave's, you're going to think you've got yourself a deal. I've got the cheapest tomatoes today, and everything's great because I've got the cheapest price. But in reality, you've got the cheapest price of the two. You haven't got the cheapest price in the market. So if those two guys are the top end of the market, you're not paying the cheapest price, you're paying the cheapest price at the top end of the market. So when I work with people, with clients, and certainly on the procurement side of things, where the team has had quite a lot of success, is going into businesses that are on live pricing and saying, listen, let's do this properly. Let's go in, let's pull your prices out, your products out. Let's properly go and tender those products with suppliers, look at the prices, and let's lock those prices down, whatever time frame that might be. Is it 4 months? Is it 6 months? Certain products, not fruit and veg necessarily, but certain products you can get 12 months as well. And let's have that agreed with the supplier. Let's put all our eggs in one basket. Yes, we have plan B, plan C suppliers. That's business continuation. That's perfectly fine. But let's go with these guys. Let's work with them in terms of developing proper partnerships, really focusing in on the exact quality that we need, and let's become a preferred client as much as we are a preferred supplier. Let's lock down those prices. Number of reasons for that. One, you know that you're going to get a consistent price, which means you can plan menus properly, you can plan cash flow properly, you can plan purchases properly. All of these things that set pricing gives you in terms of consistency. What it also means is you're not prone to fluctuation. So within that, let's face it, there's over here in Europe right now, the invasion of Ukraine is having a huge issue on certain products coming into the UK. And people are seeing fluctuation on prices going up and down and up and down. And to be honest, they only ever really go one way. They very rarely come back the other way. Coca-Cola right now seems to be changing every week, right? If you had that setting as a price fix, you could sit there quite happy. And I used this example with you the other day, Ufuk, and I know I'm rambling a little bit on this, but I really think it's an opportunity for businesses to save themselves a lot of cash. Is when you go and speak to your energy broker, very rarely will you go onto a variable rate, because we all know, we've seen what's happened with wholesale gas just recently. So we won't we won't go on a variable rate for our energy bills, but we're quite happy to do that with food, and then expect people to give us the best service, the best prices, and give us free stock for a staff party and all the rest of it. It just doesn't work that way. So, like I say, part of that £500,000 that we've saved people year to date has been by going in and locking down supply chain on fixed term price fixes, and being able to have consistency in the business moving forward, so that menus can be priced properly and that side of things as well. So, I think if people listening to this or watching this back afterwards are on live pricing, I would really urge you to speak to your purchasing guys, to find purchasing consultants, people like yourself, to really help them understand whether that live pricing is actually working for them, or whether they might be better having a proper conversation from a tender process moving forwards as well.
Absolutely. So back maybe 5 years ago, I will tell you the story of how I became the biggest Wagyu buyer in the whole world. So I did the purchasing program in the US, and it was very successful. So I went to buy for the company's Middle Eastern operations. So what I found is that we split, purchasing from like 8 different places. And when I showed like there is an ABC to this, and it's very simple. Use this logic every time. Acquire your data, your usage data, for a set time period. Quantity, dollar amount, and the SKUs, details, specs, all that kind of stuff in one spreadsheet. Go to the suppliers, put that in front of you. When you divvy up your purchases between 3 companies, they think they are getting the lion's share. If you split them between 3 companies, they are getting, say, 30% each, 35% each, right? So they know, they think your company is that big. But when you put 100% in front of them, this is what I want. Give me the best pricing for all of it, and you will get the business. You may not get the best pricing from a single supplier in 100% of the items, right? But what you are doing is total package this. What's going to be the cost of the total package, right? So I did that in Dubai, and the company saved 20% in its meat purchases from the Australians at that time. So it was massively successful, and that we are talking about, like, not a commodity. We are talking about one of the rarest things in the restaurant industry, ultra high-end Wagyu beef, basically the 0.0001% of meat products. So I negotiated with the producers, the ranch, going back all the way between the distributor, me, and the Australian ranch, because I had to make sure that we have supply, because we were the largest Wagyu buyer in the world. So I had to also control the supply to come to us at that time. This basically, like, ABC always works. Even starting this conversation will help you. Like, if you don't ask the question, you won't get an answer from the supplier or the distributor. Start somewhere, you will get somewhere. Contact me or Scott if you have any questions. We'll be happy to help you. And one more thing, just to tie this conversation into the previous podcast, as you are opening more locations, Excel becomes, or like good old fashions of managing the business will no longer be viable. So setting up operational systems is all that important, and you need internal controls and operational systems to make all of this scaling up work, which we covered in the previous podcast. So just want to say this. Basically, it is not one thing or another thing. It's a comprehensive. You need to look at all of this, like, comprehensively in order to purchase. Like, you can make the deal, but are you getting the agreement price? How would you know? System, communication, good employees who know what they are doing, who care about the business, who are incentivized properly, all these kinds of stuff. So it's a whole system. It's a whole, not one thing or another thing. Scott, would you like to add anything on this side before we go over to GPO?
Yeah, I think, there's a couple of points there that you've touched on really well. I think looking at that potential savings as a basket is really important. Don't put 10 things up for a tender, for example, to come back that aren't that expensive and completely poo-poo it, because it is overall basket that can make a huge difference. And when you do have those 2 items, if those 2 items aren't the highest item that you buy, then it's probably not going to have that much impact. And that's where, again, back to that relationship between ops and finance, that's where you guys have to start working together to go, okay, is this a high usage item? Is this an item that's going to keep recurring again and again and again, and running a model? And that's where the ops guys can really start using the finance team to their advantage by being able to get them to start working up those models that can help them have a better perspective on what that might be. So I think, looking at basket makes a huge difference. And, again, if you start going into live pricing and picking off items, you're reducing your basket size, you're reducing your purchasing power, and it starts diluting the whole thing around being able to grow your supply chain sustainably. Then I think you just touched on it from a systems perspective. I think what becomes really important as you start growing and scaling is your understanding of your business and being able to do that at your fingertips, because having knowledge available, having data available means you're giving suppliers much more information to go out and negotiate pricing, negotiate listing fees, negotiate credit terms, all of this type of thing. So, investing in proper systems as you start scaling becomes really important. And then constantly reviewing that data and making sure that it's good data is equally as important as well. And, being able to pull off your purchases of X product at fingertips for the last 6 months. You'd be surprised how many businesses I go into that can't do that. Or when they do send it, they go, well, it might not be that accurate, but here you go, this is what I've got. So it's really important to do that. And I think, we touched on it before, but, one of the big things that we used to KPI our supply chain guys on previously was how clean the data was and how effective that data could be when he started going into tender processes and that type of thing. So it's really important that you do that. And I've spoke before about how MarketMan was huge for us in terms of being able to do that, both from an inventory perspective and then also from a wholesale perspective as we started doing central production and that side of things. And it really is important to have a system that your team use on a daily basis to be able to effectively analyze what's coming through from a supply chain perspective. So yeah, that would be my closing on this one.
Awesome. And GPOs, like this, anyone who is listening, like this is the bomb. This really is the bomb that's going to change your restaurant's life. Basically, you sign up to a group purchasing organization. These organizations, the largest restaurant related one has 25 billion of annual purchases in the US. I'm working with that company, and we basically implement the program for our clients. And I did this when I was an executive in my previous life, and I have seen how drastic the changes are. So GPO has $25 billion in annual purchases, okay? So they have 50-something really smart purchasers whose job is to, manage understand the commodity markets, what's happening, negotiate and make deals with vendors. And I have yet to see any medium to small size business who can have a resource who understands, what's happening in the commodity markets, right? Because we can't afford to hire those resources. So when somebody tells you, a distributor tells you that, there was a drought in Mexico and tomato prices are skyrocketing, I mean, you probably haven't checked Chicago commodity markets for tomato futures, right? So they negotiate over a lump sum that we don't have access to, right? I'm talking about $25 billion in total. For every aspect of the business, they are 1,000 times larger than what we can put to the table, number one. Number two is their purchasers. They have the full story of what happened, what's happening now, and what's going to happen, because they are professional purchasers. So put these two together, what you get is an average of 15% savings. And it's not just me from past experience saying that. National Restaurant Association is also saying 15% in average savings for restaurants. So hospitality industry doesn't know too much about GPOs. Healthcare industry figured them out, 10, 15 years ago. So the first GPOs were focused on healthcare. Right now they are switching over to restaurants. If you don't have a relationship, connect me or Scott, and we will put you on the right track. You don't have to worry about, negotiations, price negotiations. You will get the best pricing available, and it's a game changer. It's a freaking game changer. Imagine lowering your food and broadline prices by 15% at an average, and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to knock on the door. You don't need to manage the pricing. You don't need to do a ton of stuff, and you can focus on what you do. So you can outsource your purchasing. When I say purchasing, I don't mean the day-to-day. And what I mean is the procurement aspect of this, the sourcing aspect of this. Sourcing comes from GPO, and you purchase like you always do through the regular means. You use Cisco, you still use Cisco. You were ordering one way in Cisco, you still order the same way in Cisco. But the underlying price changes drastically. That's all I have to say on this, Scott. Would you like to, how did you say $500,000? Were you using any GPOs?
No, we developed our own, in all honesty. So when when we started out to do it, my managing partner is my old supply chain director, and he was the one who, the way it was set up was, he was the one, excuse me, who was going to manage relationships with the suppliers, because he was the one who had this relationship with the suppliers. And I was going to be the one who, when through the work with Auden and the advisory business, was going to be kind of looking at who we could help. And when we did it, we really talked about how we as Auden could develop a purchasing pot, a purchasing basket with suppliers, so that we could go to founders, startups, small brands who didn't have the purchasing power, who didn't have the credit terms, who didn't have all of these things that the big guys can get easily, didn't have the knowledge, didn't have the know-how, didn't have the network of suppliers. We could bring that to them, and we could help them benefit from that. So we were very, very clear with people who we were going to work with from a supplier perspective to say, when we come and talk to you as Auden, we want to have an Auden pot. We want to have an Auden basket. And each individual restaurant keeps their own basket. So if they grow and they scale, perfect. But we want to have a part of that, so that as we keep bringing people in at the lower end, they can benefit from us obviously having a bigger pot and working with you as suppliers. So we developed that as our model, so that we can go to a 5-star hotel, we can go to a small startup at its first brick and mortar site, to a restaurant chain that is probably, our mean is 5 to 10. Over 10 people start bringing in supply chain teams and things like that. And we can say to them, because of our purchasing power, because of our relationships with these people, we can help you benefit from group purchasing that you wouldn't normally get. So we can add value to you because we can help you be more efficient. And that's our USP. The other side of what we want to do as well is, we want to be able to say to our clients and those people who benefit from that purchasing power as well, we have the relationship with the supplier. So we want you to know them. We want your account manager to give you love, to come and see you, to send you your Christmas box and all the rest of it. But we want you to know that if there's ever a problem and something goes wrong, we have a phone call to the right guy in the organization who can jump in on your behalf and can fix those issues. And that's something that you wouldn't normally get by being a X million dollar business on your own. So we can bring the efficiency, but we can bring that support aspect of going, do you know what? We don't just work with anyone. We work with people who we know, who we have a relationship, who we can call the managing director to solve the problem if there's a problem, which means you are safe in the knowledge that you have business continuation. So that's how we structured Auden procurement. And I 100% agree with you. I think, some of the mistakes that I made as an operator was in businesses where we didn't have purchasing people, because we probably spent far too much money. We made mistakes, especially on things like, bespoke packaging, bespoke items, items that you're bringing in from certain countries because it's right for your brand and the listing it, consolidation, co-packers, all this type of thing. It's technical stuff, and it shouldn't stop you from doing it if you're a small organization. It just means that you need to get the resource, because whatever you would pay to these people, I promise you it will come back in savings from mistakes that you make by doing it yourself. So I think, there's all of that. But I think, where people should be using GPOs is one, yes, on absolutely find me the best price possible. but also what are the other things that matter to your business? So when we go in and we talk to people, we go, okay, what is the main aim you want to get out of this process? Is it price? Is it credit terms? Do you want 30 days up to 45 days? Do you want to, do you want to help your cash flow? Have you got pain points? So can they not deliver on time? Can they not deliver on the right days? Do they not deliver at the right time of day? In London, for example, a lot of people need deliveries overnight. Some businesses that haven't got big purchasing power can't command that. We can help with that. So we really go in and go, come on, what are your pain points? What are your frustrations with your current guys? That's what we're going to tackle, and that's what we're going to fix. And by using our relationships, we can do that. And that's what these GPOs can do. They can help you do exactly that. So before you contact these people, yeah, everyone wants to see price efficiency. Absolutely. That's number one on the list. But don't forget to mention the other pain points that you have in your business, because these guys are experts and they can help you fix that from there as well. Another thing in terms of, bespoke packaging, one thing that we always used to have with that was, we used to tie up so much cash in packaging because we'd have to prepay, you'd have to have it stored and all the rest of it. And it wasn't until we got, my managing partner who's working with me now into our business, and he was like, no, we can do this on call-off basis. We just have to negotiate the right way. Say if we don't draw it down in 12 months, then we'll pay for it from you. So even little bits like that can free up cash can make a huge impact on your business that is super important to your survival. So I think, don't be scared to tell these guys everything that's annoying you in your business, because there's probably an answer for a lot of it. It's just about getting that knowledge and expertise on the case to fix it.
$500,000 in the pockets of these hardworking restaurateurs. That's really amazing.
It's always better in your bank account than anyone else's, right? That's number one. And number two, you don't want to stick 20, 30 grand in a bank account of some packaging guy that's stuck in a storeroom waiting for you to draw it down, and then you're worried about payroll every month. So it's keep the money in your account and work with these guys, and absolutely make a commitment on it and what have you. But yeah, it's about freeing up that cash is super important. Is it? Cash flow is king.
Absolutely. So we can switch over. We have 8 minutes left. We can switch over to Q&A part. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Let's wait out for a minute if anyone have. Not right now.
Yeah, and GPOs are effective in expanding as well. That's why these are not like two separate topics. While folks are preparing their questions, they have a national network, right? And they can find you when you are expanding the business. They help you set up your sourcing network, your procurement network in the new states, in the new metro area, and save over there as well. So a hugely important thing. I think that's like the most important thing that I will like. If you guys are following me like on LinkedIn, any of the podcasts, I think GPO is like the biggest game changer in my opinion. Not from a management standpoint, but from a financial standpoint, because you still need to do all the things that we discuss here to scale up, formalize processes, internal controls, systems, accounting, all that kind of stuff like HR. But from a financial standpoint, GPO has the biggest financial impact to the organization.
Yeah, I think, it's a really interesting topic, this, isn't it? Because I think, every business has opportunity to find efficiency. And that doesn't mean cutting quality. It doesn't mean cutting consistency or any of those things. It's about finding what little gems you have. And, if sharing advice in terms of, we've talked about a lot, but what would be the first thing that I would do after listening to these podcasts as an operator? I would go to my purchasing guy. I would go to my finance guy. I would go to my EPOS system. and I'd pull off my top 50 things that I sell, or top 10 if you want to start small. And that's what I'd focus on first. Get the top 10 things that you sell and look at whether you can find better pricing, better quality, better credit terms, more frequency in deliveries, which means you don't have to hold as much stock at once. So you're not tying up cash. Focus on those 10 things and then extend it to 20, extend it to 30, and just keep going down. Or you say another way to do it is you go, okay, let's look at meat, let's look at fish, let's look at fruit and veg, let's look at dry stores, and focus on those things. If you don't want to, sometimes I go into businesses and there's a lot of emotion around certain subjects with chefs, particularly, right? Meat is always one, fish is always one, fruit and veg is always one.
Mm-hmm.
When I go into businesses, the first things that I always say, let's have a look at is dry stores, because dry stores generally is pretty unemotive in terms of what people buy. So again, if there's an emotion around meat and fish and fruit and veg, and the chef's happy with what he's got, there's still things you can go at that can make a huge difference. So dry stores is a great one. Looking at who provides you soft drinks is another great one as well, because Coke doesn't change no matter who you buy it from. It's about finding the supplier that can do the best terms for you. So there's another one in terms of juices and soft drinks and beers, spirits, that type of thing. And just start looking at what your most selling items are, because they're the ones that are going to have the biggest impact. And I used to say to people in my operations, if we're starting to look at the low hanging, the stuff that's kind of doesn't sell a lot and isn't going to make a huge impact, but it's going to chip away, we're obviously doing something right, because we've already tackled the stuff that does sell the most. So my key takeaway from this, homework for anyone watching this, is go and find your top selling items, focus on them, and see how you can make a difference. Don't be scared to keep looking at what energy you're paying, your insurance broker, getting second quotes, third quotes. And I know it can be laborious and I know it can be time consuming and boring, but to just benchmark every now and again what prices you're seeing in the market is super important, because the guy who was cheapest last year might not be the cheapest this year. So, it's there. And I think, the last piece of advice for me is, if you've been working with someone for 5 years and they're some of the most expensive guy on the block, have a conversation with them. Don't just move to the cheapest guy. Go to the guys who you've been with for 5 years and go, listen, I've just done a tender. You're above market rate. You're above the lowest price. Is there a reason for it? Is there anything we can do about it? Try and work as a partnership, because we need suppliers to keep the ecosystem working, and we need to have good relationships with them. So you never know when you might meet again. So keep those conversations open, benchmark absolutely, but don't just jump for the sake of it. Keep things open and give people opportunity to look at it as well. So I guess those would be my key homework takeaways from this couple of sessions.
Very good point, Scott. I think we come to I think this is the turn of the hour. Is there anything else you would like to add, Scott?
No, fantastic. Thanks very much for having me on these 2 times, Ufuk. I know we enjoyed talking, so really appreciate it and really enjoyed it.
Always. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Awesome. Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Scott. We had 2 great podcasts, many more to come. Thank you so much for moderating, and thank you everyone for joining us today. This will be live in, I think, LinkedIn makes this available, and then we will also post a shorter version of this in different platforms. Thank you so much for tuning in today. It has been my pleasure, and looking forward to the next podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Ufuk.
Thank you. Bye.